talking about community. And there have been amazing life hacks on how to do community, how to be in community. You could Google, 10 top things to start community or be community or whatever. But what I know is that we don't have to look too far. We can go right to the root of every single religion, which has given us two ideas. And the first idea is love God with all your heart and soul. That's it. Love God with all your heart and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. And if you do those two things, and those two things are in every single religion, the core of the tree will take care of herself, right? So when I think about love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, I think about a tree. And the tree reaches up, and she loves God. Everything is devoted to the light. In order for her growth, she looks up and she says, let me absorb this light into my being, and follows it, just like a sunflower or anything that's beautiful that grows organically needs that light. And the rain and all of the things that come. And then the next thing is the roots. And the roots is the community, the being in the earth, So if I take care of my roots and be in community, and if I take care of my branches and praise, my divine, whatever that divine might look like, the core of the tree gets taken care of. But the thing is, for us, many of us today, we're invited just to think about the core of the tree. And we forget about our roots, and we forget about our branches, and then we literally start to wilt. And so we want to go back to the basic idea of, praise your God, whoever that is, and then take care of your roots. So since the beginning of time, communities have been forming. Since the beginning of time, there's been tribes, there's been groups, there's been the need to belong. That's an innate thing that lives within each of us, that we want to find a place to put our roots down. And since the beginning of time, these communities have acted in sort of a safety zone, a comfort zone. And so the safety zone allows us to be safe, to feel into our most authentic state of being, to not have to put on airs, to not have to show up in some inorganic way. It's beautiful to have a safety zone where you can just relax and lean back. So that's what a good community could look like. So you might look around your life and say, well, where are my safety zones? We might have it with our families. We might have it where you go to the gym. You might have it where you go to church. You might have it in your certain little circles. These are the places where you feel really safe. And everyone deserves that, to have that safety. But the thing is, the more people, we have more and more people on the planet than have ever been on the planet, and we are losing the value of the safety zone because we have an epidemic of loneliness. I mean, we see it everywhere. And one of the reasons I think we have this epidemic of loneliness is that we have people, and all of us are being groomed to reach out into the global community. We all have access to the global community. We know what's happening in the White House. We know what's happening with Bill Cosby. We know what's happening with the latest shooting. Now, we're inundated with all of this news, and we feel a responsibility to know it, and it has access to us, and we have access to it. And so we're engaged in this bigger conversation than we've ever been involved in before. We are engaged in this big global community where we have an immediate ability to find out anything we need to know that we could have ever thought about. And that, looking out into this bigger horizon, has sometimes encroached on our local community. So less and less we're knowing who our neighbors are. Less and less we're investing in those smaller conversations, those more intimate conversations. Both of them are good, but there needs to be a balance. And sometimes what I'm noticing is that we're out of whack. We're all like reaching for this higher horizon, and all of the mundane, day-to-day, beautiful aspects of life are going uncared for. So this week, like last month we talked about your garden, like this week we're continuing that conversation of how do you care for your comfort zones? your comfort zones need to be cared for. And your comfort zone could be your car that you drive around in. It could be your bedroom. It could be your bookshelf. It could be any nook or cranny of your life that's just calling for a little care and attention. When we start A Course in Miracles in the very beginning, we're asked to look around the room and just take in the room and notice each thing and say, I don't know what this thing means. And all of a sudden, you're like looking at things differently. And you're like, wow, my house is a mess. I haven't dusted in years. And if we don't look at it, we don't see it. We spend so much time up here, out there. So this month, I'm going to ask you again to just draw back in and take care of, your hula hoop. What's in your hula hoop? That's your comfort zone. So there's... The reason that we sometimes have this addiction of looking out into the world is always through fear and isolation and loneliness is an outpicturing of a place that we've been in fear. And the fear is usually related to not getting what we want or losing something that we have. And so we go about, cultivating these conversations in our minds, and we don't ever allow ourselves to fully engage and show up. So these not getting what we want or losing something we have, like that could be, losing something we have could be as silly as our identity. Well, I want people to see me as perfect, so I'm not going to show up late, or I'm not going to show up, in tattered or authentic. Like I know, but these are places that anything that can be threatened is not real anyhow. So any place that you feel like you're protecting is not worth protecting, because everybody is the same. We're all the same. Like, we all have the same fears. They're not some special fears that you have, which is kind of incredible. In fact, I bet if we went around the room right now and said, what's the secret you're afraid to tell, that every single person that told a secret would be like, oh my gosh, me too. I'm afraid of that too. And there's only really a few of them that keep us all sequestered and segregated. They're not special. So, and in regards to communities, instead of making community a place where everyone can come equally, we've done this incredible thing to communities where we've made them VIP. And we've made them special. So we've almost created a Ponzi scam over community. And there's only special places that you could go, and we want to kind of dismantle that. In fact, the front stoop, the kitchen table, they're some of the most sacred places in the world. And I can't tell you how boring the VIP rooms I've been in are. So there's nothing special behind the doors except for specialness. And specialness is separateness, and separateness breeds to loneliness. So you want to slowly dismantle that idea and that addiction and get back to authenticness, authenticity. So the idea of also taking responsibility for the communities that you pick, because when the people that you're hanging out in community, they influence you. If you're hanging out in communities that are, lackadaisical or confused or angry, like that can affect you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, if you have people in your life who show up like that you should run from them. But what I would suggest is that you just keep it light and polite in those corners where you might be growing past some of those conversations. Just keep it light and polite, and then continue to go to the places that are deep wells for you. And only you know where those places are. For some of you, it could be a walk in the forest. For others, it could be going over to your neighbor's house and being of service. Whatever it is, figure out what fills your well and do that, because you are responsible for your well-being. So here we are at Speakeasy. We say we're a progressive spiritual community. So community is the third thing in our mission statement. And a community is a place where we share a message of love, where we engage in conversations, where we promote well-being and self-care. And we want to surround ourselves with that, whether we're here or not. So where are the places that share, that you feel is sharing a message of self-love that promotes well-being for yourself? Kuan Yin is on our altar this morning, and she is, like I said, one of the major deities in the world that it'd be beneficial if you knew about her. And this is something that she says about community. She says that, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it's not Kuan Yin. It's Coretta Scott King. Completely different. It's not the same person. Same person at all. They probably think the same, though. She says, it sounded kind of modern for Kuan Yin, so I was like, is this true? It says, the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. So that's why it reminded me of Kuan Yin. The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. So how compassionate are we in community? That means that we don't measure our community by the number of people in the seats or the number of dollars in the bank. We measure our community and the well-being of our community by a degree of care that's happening. And, I could look through my phone right now and tell you about all of the little ways that underneath the Sunday morning, people are caring for each other. And it's beautiful to witness that. So you want to notice where you're going to show up to care or where you're allowing yourself to be cared for. That's either side of the seesaw is very scary. But if you get on, it's kind of fun. How much do you care about your community? Who is in your community? What do your communities look like? And how do you demonstrate care in your communities? Compassion means sympathy and concern for the suffering or misfortunes of others. So this past week, actually this past month, Will's been telling me about a community that he's in. Will's my husband. And he goes to the gym. He gets up at like 3:30 in the morning and he goes to the gym. And he's there with a lot of older men. And there's this one guy that has been talking to him for, the last year. And everyone in our family know him because he calls Will Wayne. And he always says to us, he calls me Wayne, and we're like, you should wear a name tag, or you should call him the wrong name. Or we're trying to give him suggestions on how to, because he thinks it's too far into the relationship for him to correct this guy. And he's pretty intimate with Wayne. And he says Wayne talks with everyone, but he feels like Wayne has taken him under his wing, and he's his buddy, And Wayne always tells him the things that they're going to do together in the future. And he's like this old guy. He's like, I got a place down in Florida. You're going to come visit me, and I'm going to visit you up on your lake house and all this other stuff. And Wayne. And he told me the other day that Wayne was like, hey, can you get the Band-Aids off my back so I can go swimming? And I was like, oh my God. I was like, did you? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. And I said, what did you do with them? He's like, I just handed them to him. And he was totally fine with it, right? And then the next week, he's like, Wayne asked me to help him put his flippers on. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, it's really hard to put your flippers on. This is this is really hard for me to get someone else's flippers on, but, I just did it. And he's like, Maureen, do you know what it would take for an older man to ask somebody for help? And he's like, he's probably a widow. And he's coming to the gym with Band-Aids on his back. And it made me think of my dad. My dad lived by himself for the last couple of years of his life. And to think that my dad might have had a surrogate son in his communities, because my dad was like this guy. He spoke with everyone. That's what community looks like in the optimal way. That we show up and we do these things for each other without that kind of a thing. Now, I'm sure I probably do things in this community that he'd be like, no way, So we're all called to do what we're called to do, and we all are preordained to do exactly what we're called to do. So the things that would eke you out are not the same things that you're not going to be called to do that. You're going to just be called to do the things that you're capable of doing. And there's something so very beautiful about that. There's something so very precious and priceless about, investing in the guy that's under your nose. And that's how we literally make the world a better place to live in. So Kuan Yin is a goddess of compassion, and it says that she was a major helper and a major healer, and that she was a step from nirvana. She had done so much helpful stuff, and she was a step from nirvana when she heard a weird sound. And she turned around and she said, what is that sound? And she was told, that's the wailing of the world. That's the pain of the world. People are crying and they're in pain. And she said, well, I'm not going to nirvana until everyone's going to nirvana. And she went back to the world and continued to serve. And that's why she's called the goddess of compassion. And so there's many cultures in the world that, that pray to her for healing. And again, she's like the equivalent of the Blessed Mother. So the reason I kind of love the Kuan Yin is this is what she says. Loving people is the most helpful thing anyone can do. Your society has the resources at this very moment to fashion industries and lifestyles conducive to a non-harmful environment. There's a popular belief that overpopulation is the threat of the world's environment. However, for many places upon the earth, it's also very much a question of resource availability and distribution. There's a real need for creating a holistic infrastructure that can support everyone. So what it's basically saying is we have the resources right now for everyone to live well. It's only a matter of our extension of it. So sharing our good in a way that's not, the old system of get what you get and don't, and can all you can, get all you can all you get, and poison the rest of that scarcity. Again, that scarcity. So she's inviting us to move into impeccable generosity. So the mindset of Kuan Yin is an extension, is to be an extension and to look to where we could be an extension, to recognize that everyone is a part of our family. Today we have this access to this global community, but we want to get back to the local community, to the safety zones, to the comfort zones, a place where you're known and you're nurtured and you're appreciated and you're mildly challenged. Like, don't think you won't be mildly challenged in community, but that's for you. It's not something that's against you. That's going to happen in community. We like to think it's just going to be a happy, shiny place, but in your families, there's people who mildly challenge you, sometimes majorly challenge you. But so we can't pretend that that's not going to happen, but that's for us. There's a quote in Galatians 6:2. It says, "Carry each brother's burdens in the way that you will, in that way you will fulfill your own Christ consciousness." So I love that, to carry each other's burdens. We had some people in our community who had major burdens in the last couple of months, and we all, get together to pray on them. But what I also like is carry each other's triumphs as well. When somebody wins here, we all win. So to know that we are responsible for the celebration and for the support of each other through our triumphs and through our tragedies. That's how we create community. I mean, there's nothing more than that. Do unto your brother as you would have him do unto you. If you want to have that in the world, then we get to be that in the seat, in the moment, in the shoes that we're wearing, in this breath. We get to be that. So, this is why it wasn't making sense. It was a little bit out of order. Okay, I have 2 pages. I wanted to tell you one other story about Kuan Yin. And one member of our community this week Bonnie sent me a picture. She's on a trip right now. She went on a retreat, and she is in, where is she? She was in Sedona. And she said, "Maureen, I saw this beautiful picture of Kuan Yin, this beautiful altar of Kuan Yin." And I said, "I know that altar. I haven't seen it, but my good friend Joe Wolf saw that altar, and he had this major experience." So if you don't know Joe Wolf was a teacher of A Course in Miracles he lived here, and he was an ex-con. And he went to prison. He did all this bad stuff. And then he went to prison. They put him in solitary confinement. And he had a vision of Kuan Yin. And she came to him, and she lit up his whole room. And he had an awakening. And he had a couple other awakenings. And he got out of prison. And he didn't know who Kuan Yin was. He just saw this beautiful woman in white come into his cell. And he got out of prison, and he dedicated his life to being a change for those men and women who are incarcerated. And so he couldn't go to prison because he was an ex-con. But so what he decided to do was he was going to write books that he could bring to the men and women in prison that would help them to access a greater degree of peace. And he did everything for this ministry. And one day I went over to his house, and his house was like, it wasn't really a house. I was sharing this morning. It was like a little room above Wausau, that restaurant that's down the way. And I went upstairs, and it was this teeny little room, a teeny little bed, and a teeny little desk. And I was like, "Joe, man, you're out of prison. You don't have to live like this anymore." And he kind of laughed at me because everything that he did was for his community. Everything was for his community. And I got to say, he was one of the happier people I know. God got him where he needed to go. He ended his life down in Florida. He was given this little home to live in. He died in his chair smoking his pipe. You know, he had a really happy experience, and he made such an impact on the men and women of his community. The people who were who would ask for these books, and he would spend his own money to send these books off to them. And so in that way, he demonstrated a leader in his community. And he took the thing that threatened to break him, and he transformed it into being a bridge for other people in his life. And you know, that goes on until today. There's still people reading his books and receiving his messages. And so anyway, he went to Sedona, and when he got to Sedona, he saw the statue of Kuan Yin. And he said, oh my gosh, I know this woman. She visited me. And he ran into the shop, and he asked the shop owner, who's that lady outside in that statue? And they said, that's Kuan Yin. And he said, she came to visit me. And so when Bonnie sent me this picture this past week, I recognized, I said, you know, that was the same one that Joe spoke of. And here at Speakeasy, we get to honor all paths. You know, we get to celebrate all conversations. And I think it's imperative that we begin to look outside of our comfort zones, to take care of our comfort zones, which means our own personal well-being and our own personal spirituality, and stay true to that as we root into this life and this experience, but also to spread our branches out, to appreciate there's so many other conversations that are necessary for us to at least know about and appreciate, and to make space for in not just our conversations here, but to be open to them out into the world, because that's where we're moving. We're moving into a more fluid conversation. And Speakeasy is just one of the places where we do that. So I do have two final quotes that I wanted to share with you. I'm sorry, my talk was a little bit scattered today, so that's how it is. You can have anything you want if you're willing to just help others get what they want. That's from Zig Ziglar. You can have anything you want in life if you're just willing to help others get what they want. Why is that true? Because God can't do for you what you're not allowing God to do through you. And so this get my own mentality, it's literally sucking, it's cutting us off from the flow. But as we give, we do receive. That's why what we do unto our brothers, we do unto ourselves. That's why it's imperative that we take care of our brothers. As soon as we let go of our getting, our desires, and all of the other, and we just reach out and say, what can I do to help you? We literally turn on the faucet of magnificence to flow in our life in ways that we couldn't even know to ask for. And the ego will say that doesn't make any sense. Like, don't you know, the math doesn't add up, and I do have to get my own, or I'm going to live under a bridge for the rest of my life. You know, the ego is very convincing. But I would invite you just to try it out. Just to try out for a week, what would happen if I really turned the channel from sucking in to extending out? And, you know, if you're ever nervous about showing up anywhere, that nerves is connected to what will they think of me, and it's all about me. But if you say, I'm only here to be helpful, you turn the channel. And then it doesn't matter what, even if your notes don't make any sense, people still like you. Actually, I have one other little story that I want to share with you because I thought it was important. This past week, Letty and I were speaking on the phone about her stepping into this leadership position. And I watched this woman on the Facebook video, and she was a survivor from, you know, having been compromised at the hands of Bill Cosby. And she was saying, you know, I'm on this, you know, this panel of women, and I'm looking at the jurors, and there's a young African-American man there, and I know that he has had a positive impact because of Bill Cosby, who showed up in a time when we didn't have masculine African-American leaders to role model for us. And I know he's got to make that decision on behalf of truth. And I'm so grateful that he did. So that's one part of the story. The other part of the story that Letty was telling me, which I think is important, is that that Bill Huxtable was also an idea for so many, like Letty was sharing, African-American girls and boys who didn't have fathers. Her dad wasn't present at the time of her childhood, who said, this is my dad. Like, he's showing up as an aspect of something that I'm missing and craving. And so there's a part of us that needs to not amputate the whole man. All of us have somebody in our life that we want to amputate the whole man. And we have to be willing to appreciate still the God qualities even in the darkest hour. That's our job. You know, we're miracle workers. We can't fall into the patterns of the world that just wants to execute and move on. You know, we have to be willing to look again and look again and look again, and even forgive the unforgivable. If we're not doing that, we're not doing anything. And we're not here to do nothing. We're here to create the good, the beautiful, and the holy. And it takes a strong individual, and that strong individual can inspire a strong community, and I am hoping that you're going to be a part of that community here. So that's what I say about that.